Good afternoon, everybody. This is Greg Cummings, and I'd like to welcome everyone to an importer's journey to import compliance excellence through automated self-filing. And I'll start off by saying I'm going to be doing this from my desk today on our floor because we upgraded our demo room to Windows 8. And I don't know how many of you have experienced Windows 8, but I can tell you it's winning so far. So it's been a little bit of a struggle to catch up with that. So we'll try to keep the ambient noise down as best we can here. Again, my name's Greg Cummings, and I'm a principal here at TRG Direct. And for those of you not familiar with TRG, we are the largest web-based application for self-filing both ISF and customs entries. We also have Ned Blinick of Blinko Systems, and Blinko Systems, through their third wave, provides full automation and integration of your import processes and partners with TRG Direct to provide a completely automated self-filing capability. Our importer today is Atalanta Corporation. We've got John McClellan and Charles Gabbert. John is the CIO of Atalanta. He's been with them for 20 years. Started out, he's been in the food industry 20 years, 13 as the CFO, and the last 7 as the CIO. And Charlie's been with Atalanta for over 40 years. So he's got quite a bit of experience there. He's also a licensed customs broker and the director of their import compliance. So as most of us are aware, ACE and the path Customs has been taking to centralize and improve their import IT and systems is really having a great effect on the industry. And as CBP continues to improve that ACE infrastructure, and most recently with ITDS, they're becoming more e-filing based, which is enabling importers to be even more proactive in interfacing with CBP and perhaps even any sister PGAs that you might be involved with as well. Today, most of us are taking advantage of ACE with reports for ISF and trying to keep up with what Customs sees about our timeliness and performance there. And of course, you've got a very comprehensive review capability on your customs entries. So this information now more and more is in our hands, is in the importer's hands, which means more and more you can start to bring things in-house and continue to take more control. So in this atmosphere, self-filing is, of course, a natural step that many importers are looking to review and take. And that process oftentimes can have similar startup situations that occur amongst a corporation. As you move in that direction, you may start to experience amongst the teams perhaps some initial skepticism or concern and inertia when it comes to the idea versus a third-party filing. And we thought that looking at how others have navigated that journey and the successes that they've enjoyed is very much worth exploring. So today, we thought it'd be a great opportunity to provide you with the experience of an organization who's made that journey to self-filing, and they file their ISF and entries and have FDA involved as well, of course, since they're in the food industry. So as you hear the Q&A, Atalanta provides a great perspective because they're both a self-filer, but they also use traditional customs brokers for some of their entries as well. So they're a perfect example of you don't have to be all in if it doesn't make sense for your import practices. And the insights that they'll share, we hope will help you better understand how that journey can be made with relative ease, and in the process can make your organization more effective, efficient, and of course compliant. So gentlemen, welcome. It's good to have you on today. And
Thanks,
I thought we'd start, John, by having you tell us a little bit about Atalanta.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Atalanta Corporation is the largest privately held food importer in the United States. It was started back in 1945, and we're headquartered here in Elizabeth, New Jersey. We do have offices throughout the United States, and we sell nationwide. We sell a wide range of products, from dry groceries to refrigerated products like cheeses and meats, and we also distribute specialty foods. We utilize 20 distribution centers throughout the U.S. And as far as the channels that our customers are in, food service is probably the largest, but we also sell to retailers and manufacturers. Regarding the brands that we carry, we do own some brands ourselves, and we do some private label. Yeah, and then finally, too, Greg, we are CT-PAT compliant.
Would we recognize any of those brands, John?
Probably not. Only if you're in the food service industry. You know, they're not consumer brands. You know, a couple of labels that you might recognize if you are in the food service industry would be Celebrity and Menu. Those are our two biggest brands that we own.
Right, those are pretty well received out there. Can you give us an overview on your import environment? What's the experience, SKUs, volume, etc.?
Sure. We currently import from over 60 countries. You know, globally, the largest 3 continents would be Asia, Europe, and South America. We have over 3,000 active SKUs, and in terms of, you know, the logistics terms, we're a hybrid. We do some FOB, some CNF, and others. You know, the volume of containers that we import are in excess of 4,500. We bring our products into ports throughout the United States. The primary one, of course, is near us here. Port Elizabeth is the biggest, but we import all throughout the United States. You know, the customs interface, that's a hybrid as well, as you mentioned earlier, Greg. We utilize customs brokers some, but we also do a lot of self-filing through Third Wave and TRG. And you know, as you might have guessed, we use Third Wave, their ERP system, and that, you know, that's the root of all of our information.
So Third Wave is kind of the hub where the information is entered, and then you're using the automation feature to push the customs information for both ISF and entry into TRG, and then we link up to the ABI and ACE for the final filing.
That's right.
All right, great. Well, Charlie, I'm going to jump to you now, and I'm actually going to do a little bit of a time warp. We were talking the other day about, you know, you couldn't quite remember when you got started self-filing with us, and I went back into the account, and it was 2006 when you actually began self-filing with TRG, so it's been over 8 years. And, you know, I know it's been a little while, but can you tell us how you decided to make that move to self-filing and some of the experiences that you've had in setting that up?
You know, our first contact with TRG was that you provided our bond, our customs bond. And at some point in time, 2006, obviously, you came and you said, hey, we have this new program, the self-filing program. And I got to say, I did not think it was going to be something Atalanta would be interested in. I just thought it would just be too complicated, too time-consuming. But it was worth looking at because there was a potential savings in entry fees. And so we you know, did a web presentation, and I got to say, I was blown away by it. The simplicity of and the flow that was incorporated into it just worked right into our system and what we were doing at that time with Third Wave. It just was like a perfect match for us. So I was ready to go right after that meeting. The training was incredibly easy. We were able to be up and running in a couple of weeks. The hardest part of the transition is developing your parts list, because you have to populate your SKUs or whatever terminology you're going to use for your individual items with the proper HTS-US number, and in our case with all the relevant FDA information. And that's a key thing, that this was a program that allowed us to deal with customs and with FDA all in one transmission. Everything got built into the manufacturer's identification and into the product description, the product identity. And once you have that set up properly, it becomes very automated, very automatic, and in cases where you have, the same type of shipping come from the same supplier, it goes very, very smoothly. From the time we transmit to customs and FDA, we usually have a response back within 15 minutes on the status. 90% of the time, it's automatic releases, both from customs and from FDA. And from that point in time, we are able to now plan on when we're picking up the containers, how we're moving them into the warehouse. It just was so efficient. It really has been a time saver, and just makes life, in all honesty, made life simpler for us, because we no longer had to chase after a customs broker for information. And if there was an issue with FDA or with customs, go through a third party. We are now able to deal with that directly and solve those problems, as few as they are, quicker than we ever could before.
Well, and I know when we talk about the concept of automation, it actually has a number of different looks. You have a lot of SKUs, and I was just thinking, you've got 3,000 active SKUs today on 4,500 containers. Do you recall what it was 8 years ago when we got started? How much have you grown?
Probably the number of containers has not grown. The number of SKUs has grown, though. Atalanta moved from being more of a commodity-based company supplying institutional size hams and cheeses. That was the foundation of the company. And it morphed into more of a Mediterranean diet type luxury specialty food item company today, where we have so many different items coming out of so many different countries to cater to the specialty food market. And so the volume, the dollar value has obviously grown just with inflation and whatnot, but the SKUs with the big growth. And,
well, yeah, and so scaling forward into a growing atmosphere that might either be growing from a straight volume standpoint or a complexity standpoint has worked for you quite well. And the automation, again, taking a look at the different looks of it, one is that parts list. I mean, that parts list is gold for you to be able to standardize what you do and the information that can move about between departments. Now there's no, part 2001 equals an SKU, an MID, a country of origin, et cetera, and there's no, that standardization helps keep things tight and accurate. And then further automation is your ability to take that data that's now within the system and start to auto-populate and auto-transmit. So it's been kind of a dual growth. So we got to the point where, all right, I like it. This looks like something that we want to move forward with. Can you tell us a little bit about the experience of moving forward to self-filing and the similarities that other companies might face? How difficult was it for you and your team to move towards the execution?
That's a twofold answer, because we have the self-filing that we did prior to the integration of Third Wave, which worked fine. It was a separate step. We had our normal flow of information from purchase order to shipping confirmation to arrival of the the vessels at the port, doing the custom, and then we would pick up and go to TRG and file the entry. And that was fine. It really worked well. No problems. My people liked working with it. They'd rather be doing that than transmitting documents to a customs broker. They liked the instant feedback. They liked not having to chase down information. It was a win-win situation from the get-go. Then phase two was when Third Wave and TRG joined together to come up with this new system that we use, and then that just really flowed right across our whole system. John can speak to that a bit.
Right. Yeah. The integration worked smoothly. You know, we're excited. We're always trying to continuously improve, and you know, by integrating Third Wave and TRG, you know, we didn't have to rekey data, and so you know, great efficiencies were had, you know, just from that step. And again, it increased the speed of information. Lots of folks had access to the information, you know, right away.
And that information resides in your environment too, and is available.
It sure does. Yep.
So there are some questions out there and some myths about self-filing. And I know, Charlie, you're a licensed customs broker. But how do you use that knowledge, and is it even necessary to be an LCB to move forward with direct filing?
It's not necessary. It's certainly helpful, but someone who's experienced with their products and has been working with customs brokers and is familiar with the HTS US system, that's all you really need to know. You really need to know your products more than you need to know customs regulations to service your company. That's my opinion. You don't need to know all the different rules that a customs broker needs to know. It's more important that you know your product, you know what other government agencies might be involved and what their requirements are. And if you're ready to meet those requirements, there's no need for a licensed customs broker to do this.
So your team's very tuned in to what you do, where it comes from, et cetera, so they've got better intuition on what's right and what's wrong when it comes to the data sets. Is that right?
Exactly. And in today's environment, you have access to the internet. The HTS US system is up there in several different formats to be searched. The cross-reference systems for binding rulings. And the bottom line in dealing with customs, you can always request a binding ruling. It's a letter, a sample, and some information, and they come back within 30 days usually with a ruling, which is the key to you know, moving forward and knowing what your responsibilities are to the government.
No, it's nice. It's definitely nice. So now we've made that decision. We've moved forward. You're executing and doing your entries. So from a management standpoint, you've got a large number of entries. And how important has the automation that you've put in place in a number of places, how important has that been to the management of the process?
Well, it just makes everything very visible. I mean, you know, originally, and I've been doing this a long time, I go back when everything was completely paper. Permits literally went to the pier. I started out having to meet drivers at the Holland Tunnel and handing them a permit to pick up a container at the pier. It's a long time ago. Now, the visibility, the reporting, it's just everything just works. Between what we get from TRG and what we get from Third Wave, everything is laid right out there. The different reports, we're able to see what's happening today, what looks like happening tomorrow, you know, what the status is of each line item, basically, of where we are. It's night and day. I mean, I don't know how we would cope with what the government expects under CTPAT and for us with FDA responsibilities in PHMSA if it wasn't for the automation that we have through Third Wave and TRG.
Yeah, it'd take a lot more people here, for sure.
Yes.
Well, that's, yeah, from a resources standpoint, you have, you're able to manage those personnel resources much more efficiently while getting more done. And you know, one of the things that we talked about is turning your people from data entry clerks into managers of the business. So they're now in looking for ways to further streamline and improve efficiencies rather than just entering the data. You know, which is kind of where you started, but now we're in a different place and moved up to another level. And compliance, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but the compliance in your ISF program is right where you want it. I mean, it's just about 100%, and I think the only reason it's not 100% is sometimes you get some bad BLs as initial information from your trade partners. But that compliance quotient has become more important now that ISF has moved to the Informed Client Outreach program for the next year. How are you looking at your compliance both internally as well as via the ACE reports? Are you using ACE reports as much?
Not as much. I will check the ACE report card for the ISF filing occasionally, but what we're doing, again, with what comes out of Third Wave and TRG, and knowing how our system works, because we've incorporated the ISF filing right into our purchase order system. It flows from the purchase order being issued to the supplier coming back and confirming shipment. It's just a change in status for us as far as our inventory control goes, and at that same time, it becomes the ISF filing. So as we're just managing our inventory through, you know, Third Wave, we're able to push that information right into TRG, and it just becomes so seamless that we do not really worry that much about it. We know we're doing a good job, and we have faith in the system, and we do have to check it, you know, just make sure something doesn't go wrong here and there, but it's a pretty much a foolproof system. I say that because in tracking our shipments, as we do get information, the key to the ISF filing from the way I look at it is having the correct bill of lading number. And once you know you have the correct bill of lading number, we know we have the correct suppliers. We know we have the correct HTS US numbers. Everything else we have control of. The only item we do not have control over is the bill of lading number. So once we verify we have a proper bill of lading number, we don't worry anymore. We know we've done our job.
Yeah. And so it's nice to have that visibility at your fingertips and not have to go in too many other directions if you don't have to. Now you are perhaps somewhat unique in that you also have to interact with FDA. You talked a little bit about that earlier. But I think that's something that can add a little friction in the review process when you're looking at self-filing, because it's one thing to assemble your customs documentation and push that through and transmit and manage that, but then it becomes another process when you have to, quote, manage FDA. So if you could talk a little bit about that, what you did to get better acquainted with FDA and how that process works, I think that'd be very helpful.
Well, fortunately, as we were moving more towards computerization, so was FDA. And they have several variations they've gone through, but they've become very automated. And the key to them is their different reference numbers. You need to make sure you're giving them the proper FDA registration number. In the case of certain foods, they have a low-acid canned food registration number. You have to have those kind of numbers. You have to have product identifiers, and you have to have the FDA product codes. And those identification numbers are different from customs, unfortunately. The MID and the FDA numbers are not the same. You have to have separate numbers. So you have to create, again, in your parts list or in your manufacturer's list, all these important reference numbers. And again, once you create that database, it goes very smoothly. And as long as you're giving FDA, transmitting the proper information to them, they're very happy. And when we first got started, we had a couple of phone calls from them about the FDA product codes we were using and their definition of shipper and supplier differs from customs definition of shipper and supplier. We had to tweak some things in the system in order to meet their needs. And but after we got that all ironed out, and again, it wasn't a big deal. I mean, they were very cooperative. It goes very smoothly. And now with their implementation of the ITAC system, they are actually one step ahead of customs at this point in automation, because they allow for the electronic transmission of paperwork.
The document images.
The document images. And that makes life very smooth for us now in dealing with FDA.
Every once in a while, you got to talk to them, though. So you've got your contact numbers down, but everything else is automated. It gets back to the parts list. We're trying to remove as much data entry as we can, automate it with a part number, and I think also there's been some myths out there about you have to transmit via the FDA's prior notice system, and that's not the case with TRG and third wave, because what you do is it's a simultaneous transmission. So once that data set is in there for both the customs entry and the FDA, you press one button, one transmission that goes both ways. Populates on the dashboard, gives you the visibility, and you know when it's been entered. So that's worked out real well. So let's talk a little bit about the future. And I know we've had we talked a little bit about ACE integration and how that is moving forward. Now ITDS with the International Trade Data System, bringing the 47 government agencies together and allowing for greater e-filing and review of information. How are these functions, how do you see these functions aiding your program into the future?
Well, customs at this point still requires a lot of paperwork, hard paperwork. In particular for Atalanta Corporation, we have a large number of items that fall under quotas and licenses. So these are entries that we tend to let our customs broker handle, because they provide a messenger service. A permit still must go to the customs house to be reviewed, and if there's any kind of problems, then it gets bounced back to the broker and has to be corrected and sent back. And we're really not geared up to do that at this point. And so as ACE gets implemented, and I understand that November 1st of 2015, they're supposed to allow for electronic data images transfer. I think that's going to open up a whole new world for us, that we'd be better able to. We could do quota entries now, but it's cumbersome. This will be a modern version, and we'll be able to really do these quota entries. Because the downside of the quota entries, if you have a problem, is demurrage. Most of these quota items tend to be refrigerated items in refrigerated containers, and we only get 48 hours free time. So you got a very little window to with a large demurrage liability there. But hopefully next year that'll be gone, and we will be able to
be more efficient.
More efficient.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny. We live in this 2014-15 environment for electronic transfer of data, and we find a friction point because there's a broker box and documents that are being placed in a broker box that we have to manage. So keeping our fingers crossed and hoping that that all of this does come together. And customs, they're moving in this direction. For many of us who've watched ACE kind of try to get going for the past 15 years, perhaps everything they've talked about finally completing will be coming true. So now let's talk about compliance. Certainly as important as anything that we do. You're the director of compliance, and the move to automation and self-filing, how has that platform affected your program's compliance?
Well, again, CTPAT and PHMSA are the two levels of compliance that we have to look at here in Atalanta. And in doing self-filing and in gathering all that information for the self-filing, I think puts us a step up on every level of compliance. We insist on proper information of the physical location of who the supplier is, who are we buying from, what are they selling us. We incorporated all of this information into our supplier codes and into our product codes. So we're ready. We're halfway there from the get-go on that level of compliance. PHMSA and FDA has I'd almost say doubled that responsibility. They actually want us to, on some levels, to go back past the people we are buying from. If we're buying from a third party, in case in point, cheese products from Italy, the consolidator who's buying from local farms, they're asking us to know who the local farms are, and we're able to build this into the database and keep track of it through the product code system, and always have that at our fingertips. If it wasn't for that ability, it would be an incredible job that I don't think we could do it manually.
Yeah, it'd be pretty tough. A lot of filing cabinets.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, it would restrict your growth, and
it would. Yeah, it really would.
And that's what, a lot of. I think what we see out there, there's a lot of medium-sized, small, medium-sized companies are out there trying to figure out how to grow in this uber-compliant market, and the oversight from the government, the information that we have to continue to come up with. We have to find automation and ways to electronically have that be at our fingertips quickly and be able to be used where we need it to be used as quickly as possible too. So it's a nice success story for you. So John, it seems like Atalanta has experienced some very tangible business successes. Certainly costs are a fraction of what they used to be as far as the budget is concerned for your import practices. Can you give us a couple other of the tangible benefits as well as perhaps some of the intangible successes that you've experienced?
Sure. Yeah, Greg, you mentioned that we have reduced our costs, and that's been a very tangible saving. But also with the automation, and the speed of information flowing, we've been able to reduce the time in the supply chain by 2 to 3 days. Charlie mentioned that we don't incur demurrage as often. We're able to act quickly, and as such, we've wrung out a couple of days, in the supply chain. From the cost standpoint too, we're self-filing and we're saving on customs brokerage fees there. That translates to ultimately to the consumer paying less for product. And lastly, and a little bit more intangible, just the visibility of information. Previously, sometimes people would have to walk over to Charlie or his department to find out the status of a container or something like that. But he can look, or they can look now. Product manager could look right online and see what the status of that container is, and when we expect to get it, and when we expect it'll hit our warehouse.
So he can manage the customer relationship more efficiently within your infrastructure.
That's right.
Well, it's really been great working with you guys over the years, because it's fun for us to come in and perhaps identify some problems and show some potential solutions, and then execution over the years, watch how you guys have grown and changed and just continued to experience. It's real money when you can take a couple of days out of the supply chain, and it's a wonderful intangible benefit to be able to manage customer responses and experiences, because then they're happy, and then we want your customers to get into a habit of wanting to deal with you because you're easy, because you can give them information, get them the product they need, and they can have a lot of confidence in it, and that helps you grow your business. So it's what we all want to do out there. So, and that's our presentation today. We very much appreciate everyone jumping on. Atalanta is just a great story in kind of looking at, executing, and having success from a direct filing approach, and then adding automation to really take it to the next level. So at the start we said we would open it up for some Q&A. If there are any questions out there, you can go to the right side of your screen and you can chat a question, and we can it can be for John, Charlie, myself, or Ned. Ned, I know you've been answering some of the questions along the way. Are there any out there for me or our panelists that some questions we can look at?
Yeah, we have, as a matter of fact, quite a few questions. It's quite impressive to see the questions. And I guess the first question that I can answer very categorically is a copy of this presentation will be made. We've recorded it. So for those who are interested, we will post it onto a YouTube site. And if you would like us to email you a copy, if you would either contact Greg or myself, we'll make sure that you get one.
We won't even ask them to do that, Ned. We'll just send one out to all the participants who are on today. If you have another email address or person that you'd want copied on that, then certainly send that to us as well, and we'll do that.
Great. Okay, so here's a question that was just texted in, and it basically, what are your, for either Charlie or John, what are the lessons learned from the process of integration, and were there any real serious hiccups that you had to overcome? And I guess when we're talking about the integration, it's integrating third wave to the TRG system, and then the flow of information, or integrating the flow into CBP. Can either one of you respond to that question?
I'll just say first, the flow into CBP was through TRG before that, and that always worked fine.
Yeah, we started, with their web-based tool,
right,
and then migrated to integration with our ERP system, which is Third Wave. So, yeah, from my vantage point too, it went very smoothly. As Charlie mentioned, he and his team, got on the web, integration, or the web version, really, quickly. It was just a matter of a week or two.
And for me, it was invisible. At a certain point in time, after they hashed everything out, John and the folks at TRG and Third Wave, they turned the switch on, and I got to tell you, it worked well right from the get-go. Maybe a little
always
up here, there,
learning curve, but yeah, nice. It was fast.
It was really well done.
Well, I think potential hiccups that can happen out there are twofold. One, you got to be well trained, and you got to have confidence that your service provider, if you will, has customs knowledge to be able to back up your team, because setting the data up is part of the process, but once we transmit to customs, as many of you have experienced, sometimes things happen, and you either have to call customs, or we'll get pings from people who say, what the heck is this response back? So we've got a full team of brokers here who are available to field those questions, and it is implied that customer service from the brokerage side is part of this. It's included. So
let me, Greg, if I may reiterate, you hit the nail on the head with the customs knowledge and the, that knowledge that TRG has. From an IT standpoint, we were able to rely on TRG's knowledge, and we didn't have to allocate programming resources, to compensate for that. TRG, has that knowledge, and we utilize it, and that's from a CIO's perspective. That's something that I really like. It allows us to, again, focus our programming resources on other areas. We're able to leverage TRG's knowledge.
Yeah. Well, and the other potential hiccup, if you will, that I was going to bring up too is that parts list. You know, you heard Charlie talk about the parts list and how the creation of that database that links customs data with FDA data, perhaps with license data that's part of that product too internally. That's something that for some companies is a big deal, is a big hurdle. And if you haven't done it, it is by far and away a best practice. I mean, that smooths the process so that we can integrate everything towards full automation. It's much tougher if you don't have a multi-level parts database that has as much information as you can possibly do. So I think that's important to as a first start, because that's up to the company. You know, that isn't anything that we can do. That's what you have to be able to put together with your resources and knowledge. All right, Ned, next question.
Yeah, Charlie, when you went to self-filing, can you explain whether the ratio of employees, whether you had to employ more people in the process, fewer people? Do you need fewer people when you're self-filing versus your customs broker perspective? Can you shed some light on that, and in terms of efficiency of self-filing and basically your operation generally?
We had a tremendous increase in product lines at this point. I would say we've increased my staff at this point by half a person over the last couple of years. The self-filing, I think, allowed us to keep that down. We're
continually bringing new products in, and you know, there's certainly no shortage of new items, and Charlie's right. You know, the number of SKUs that we've been bringing in has been growing, you know, 4 to 5% each year. And you know, I agree with Charlie that with the integration between Third Wave and TRG, it's allowed us to keep that head count down.
And an important thing that we've done is for all new items, we gather all that information now up front. We have a very detailed process for supplier questionnaire to fill out to get all the relevant information, and then part of that is product information. We actually send them the FDA website product code builder for them to participate in setting up the FDA product codes, because they know how they're processing their products, and that's a key part of the FDA product code. So we've taken all of these things and you know, just made it all part of a system that just flows right on through. And you know, that's, as far as the personnel goes, my department's increased by half person. The company, I think, in the last 5 years has added 60 or 80 people to our purchasing and sales departments and whatnot. So I think that says something. You know what I mean? We were able to deal with this tremendous growth with the self-filing.
And I guess an ancillary part to that question would be, as ACE moves into the electronic management of documentation, and you would move more of your items or more of your entries into a self-filing mode, how do you think that will impact your efficiencies within your department?
We look at it that in what we do with self-filing and what we do with a customs broker are on a certain level very equivalent. The key with the self-filing is that we get the information back immediately. So as we transition, I don't think that would be a real change in us for personnel one way or the other at this time. It would just be, we would get that time-saving efficiency that we're getting with certain products now for all of our products.
Okay.
Charlie, you mentioned, just real quick, Ned, Charlie was talking about what he's doing with their parts list. So as they're adding a SKU, they are going back to virtual inception of that SKU to make it part of the customs database. And that's very much a best practice. You know, for whether you're FDA or not, if you're looking at, you know, when sales or acquisition or procurement, you know, starts talking about getting a new product from somewhere, you should be involved. Import should be involved, because you're going to be able to tell them, all right, well, if I've got a widget that's made in China, it's going to come in here under this tariff code and at this duty rate. But if I got a widget coming in with this tariff code from Vietnam, it might be duty free. And you can begin to get that cost structure understood from the very beginning. So that's a great best practice that you're doing there. That'd be very helpful for others to adopt if they can. All right, sorry, Ned, to jump in there.
Well, you have a multi entry point system, and the question was asked, how do you handle entries at different ports? And I guess specifically, are you self-filing across the country, or how are you set up to manage that process?
Well, I can take a quick shot at that from just a 30,000-foot point of view. A lot of times people think in terms of self-filing when they think about their broker as being a remote location filer. And when you become a self-filer, you are able to file in all U.S. ports, regardless of where you're located. So you're on the East Coast, you file L.A., Seattle, Miami, Houston, New York, doesn't matter. That gets managed through the ABI client rep. We set up a port, and you file at that port. So it's kind of like RLF, although it's not considered that by customs. You're considered a self-filer, but you don't have any barriers to filing an entry either at ocean ports or interior ports. You file a clearance at the first port of arrival, you know, at LA. If you IT to Chicago, you can file an IT entry in Chicago. It doesn't matter.
Well, Greg, I guess here's a question for you, and it's with regard to setting up an ACH account. And the questioner would like to know, is this an easy thing to do, and how does it work within the, let's say, the third wave TRG customs environment?
Yeah, it's absolutely seamless. Your statement, the statement payment is what they're referring to, has to pay all duties and fees to customs by the 10th business day, or if you're on periodic monthly statement, you'll validate it on the 10th business day, and then your account will be debited on the 15th business day of the following month. So if you're not on PMS, that's a great thing to be on, because it's a tremendous terms with the government. So it makes great sense to do that. Setting up an ACH account is an application that is done through the National Finance Center, the same part of CBP that manages your customs bond. There is a form that you fill out. You get a bank account that is attached to your ACH. You get an ACH payer code then from National Finance Center, and you simply make that part of your back-end setup in the system. Then when you pay the statement, that is a communication is sent to customs with that particular entry and statement number, and they then know that they are free to debit that account of whatever the duties and fees are. If you're on PMS, it will aggregate all of the entries for month of July and then debit your account in the 15th business day of the next month. You'll get an ACH payer code back in less than a week. They're pretty efficient there. If for some reason your company doesn't do ACH debits, and we run into this from time to time, there is the concept of an ACH credit account where you literally push the money to customs. Now, certainly the perception of safety and security is what drives that. We have never experienced any issues with ACH debit accounts being debited incorrectly or having anything associated with that that's been troublesome. On ACH credit, when you go to push, you got to make sure that you've got your policies and procedures in place to push that, because if it's not, then it's going to be a late statement pay. and custom don't like that too much. So you can in fact do either way. ACH debit is by far and away the most often used account with the government, but tremendously easy to set up.
Okay, Charlie, I guess Charlie John, the question was asked in terms of the number of line items that you put on an entry on average. Do you have many line items, or are your entries usually fairly simple in terms of the number of lines, and do lines really make a difference in terms of the preparation of the entry from a systems perspective?
Not really. We don't. We go from one item probably up to 12, but again, all of the information is preloaded. It comes right out of our purchase order system. We are not dealing on an individual line basis when we're doing this. We have what we call our traffic file and our cargo records, and the traffic file being the major unit and the cargo record being a subunit of that, and we can manipulate those records. But we're dealing in that. What happens to be in that cargo record, whether it be one item or 12 or 20 or 40, really doesn't affect me at all, because that is, as long as that information is in there properly, that'll just flow right through from third wave into TRG.
Yeah, that's if you guys are in the food industry, but we also have clients out there in automotive parts and very, very heavy, large line item things. And if you've got 50, 100, 150 line items, automation just, well, the cost at the broker level is very high. So you have a tremendous cost reduction, and automation populates the entire thing for you. So it really streamlines the process. But even if you were just working off your parts list in a PO that you were holding, you could have 15 or 20 line items, and that parts list will go bing, 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 and auto-populate that very quickly as well. So, you know, stages of automation will just take hours off of the process of setting up the entry for filing.
And I think from a third wave perspective, there are the automated customs component is separated from the PO system. It is fully integrated if you had the entire version, but the customs compliance component is fully automated, and it's set up to take in information from vendors or third-party service providers into the system, so that it fully automates the upload of a packing list, invoice detail, and bill of lading detail, so that the system is fully automated as well. And the number of line items then becomes a moot point in terms of the system generates the outputs for the ISF and the entry.
And that also aids in electronic invoice too, where in the past, if you had a high number of line items, it was easier to courier copy and courier your information because it was just so cumbersome. Now, if you've automated the process, you can populate your electronic invoice, transmit that in a matter of minutes, and get that clearance again online. So it really different ways that streamline the process nicely. Looks like we got time for one or two more, Ned.
Well, I guess there's a question that was asked about, does TRG and third wave support filings in other global markets? And right now, both TRG and Blinko are focused on the U.S. Markets for self-filing. And in the future, there is the concept of rolling this out, particularly into other North American markets and into the EU. So that was one question that was just asked of a filer.
And as Canada begins to adopt their version of ISF, that's probably when we'll get a little more serious about that at some point too. Because I think theirs is going to be for all forms. And and for those of you out there who haven't seen a customs presentation within the past month, we did talk to customs on ISF regulation, and they did indicate ocean only for now, not looking at air, truck, or rail at any time in the near future, if at all. So that's good news here.
And one final question. We have others, but this is a question that I think several people have asked, and it was about an online demo of the automated process. And from a third wave perspective at this point, there is no online demo. But if anybody out there would be interested, they can contact me. The contact information is on the slide. Greg, I believe that TRG, well, I'll let you answer that question for TRG.
Yeah, we've got our stuff posted to our website. But I think what they want to see, though, Ned, is usually what we do when we do an automation demo is we try to customize it. So we get a little bit of your information, and then we can show how it enters into the system and auto-populates for the ISF and the customs entry. And it's your data, it's your product. So we've usually gone that route, but it'll make some sense for us to do some generic automation online demos, I think, Ned. So that's a good point.
And I think I guess in honor of the time, Greg.
Yeah, I think we've beat that 1 hour, and again, we'll thank everyone for joining us today, and we will send this link out on the for today's presentation, so you can view it again or pass it around. And thanks again to our panelists. Guys, we appreciate the time today and appreciate the work with you over the years.
It's our pleasure.
All right.
And I'll just ask some, if there are questions, we'll